Hello and welcome. My name is Vineet Malhotra and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories of this hour. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirms that Hamas has agreed in principle to post-war governance in Gaza. He warns disarmament and demobilization will be difficult, but says that ongoing talks could finalize logistics and secure hostage releases soon. Israeli Defense Minister says the IDF offensive in Gaza City has displaced 900,000 Palestinians, citing intense military operations and building collapses. Pressure mounts on Hamas as civilians forced south ahead of continued assaults on urban centers. Germany vows to decisively commit to implementing US President Donald Trump's Middle East peace plan, with the Foreign Minister Vadeful calling it a unique opportunity and promising concrete support for Gaza's humanitarian aid, reconstruction and regional stabilization efforts. Israeli officials deny claims of mistreatment against Greta Thunberg and global Samud flotilla activists, labeling allegations as brazen lies. Foreign Ministry affirms detainees' rights and notes the refusal to accelerate deportation process. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said that European sanctions on Tehran have undermined the Cairo agreement, with the IAEA warning that Britain, France and Germany's decision to reimpose UN sanctions has complicated diplomacy and diminished their role in future talks. Russian Defense Ministry reports massive strikes on Ukrainian military, industrial sites and energy infrastructure. Russian forces claim capture of Kuzminovka in Donetsk. 4 civilians have been killed in Russian air attack in Lviv region, Ukrainian officials have confirmed. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara has visited polling center in Damascus as electoral colleges cast ballots for the new parliament, marking a key step in post-Assad era. Heavy rains have triggered landslips and flash floods, blocking roads, washing away bridges and killing at least 49 people in the last 36 hours in Nepal. Alright, US President Donald Trump has said that he will soon know if Hamas is serious about engaging with his peace plan. He added that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is on board to end the bombing in Gaza. Trump warned that Hamas faces complete obliteration if it chooses to remain in power instead of accepting the deal. Meanwhile, the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also commented on the implementation of the Gaza deal. He stressed that 90% of the deal is finalized and that they are working on the logistical issues. Rubio also said that Hamas, in principle, has agreed to the peace plan and to the proposal outlining what happens after the war. However, Rubio also stressed that this cannot be considered the end of the war, as some work remains to be done. He added that Hamas and Israel are very close to a deal where there will be no hostages held by Hamas. However, the Israeli government has clarified that its military retains the right to continue operations in Gaza for defensive purposes. A spokeswoman stressed that there is no ceasefire in place, only a temporary halt in certain bombings. She confirmed that Israeli negotiators will travel to Egypt tonight, with talks on the release of hostages expected to begin. Let's listen into what spokesperson had to say.
Now, this development comes with talks that will be taking place in Egypt, as the Prime Minister instructed the team, led by Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer, to finalize the technical details of the release of the hostages, a priority and first step of this deal. Now, the team will be leaving tonight with plans for talks to begin tomorrow. And I want to reiterate, these are technical talks.
Dan Perry, World Affairs Analyst, is joining us from Tel Aviv at this point in time. Dan, appreciate you joining us. Well, 90% of what this deal constitutes has been agreed upon by Hamas. But considering the history that both the parties have had with each other, which is predominantly of distrust, how certain can the world be that this is going to lead to lasting peace?
In no way certain, not at all certain, and completely and totally uncertain. This talk of 90%, basically nonsense. It comes down to whether Hamas agrees to the 1 out of 20 points that calls upon it to disarm. There are plenty of people who will swear that there's no way that can happen because no jihadist group has ever agreed to disarm, and that runs counter to their fanatical DNA. And I can't dispute that. It would be remarkable if Hamas really did agree. On the other hand, the circumstances are remarkable. Gaza has been laid waste. So many people have died. Despite the claims of genocide by Israel, the genocide could end in a split second if they agreed. So it's not exactly genocide. And yet they're taking their time. I cannot predict if they will, and I think much depends on the degree to which the Arab countries, and in particular Qatar, will lay down a law with what remains of Hamas and will force them to. Remember, Qatar just received a very significant sweetheart deal from the Americans, codifying a sort of NATO-like commitment to Qatar's defense. And I have to think that was down payment for precisely this moment when Qatar has to twist arms with Hamas to the breaking point and get them to agree to that one thing. The other aspects of the 20 points are all important, of course. And it's true that they may be such that agreement can be reached because Hamas does agree to hand over the formal keys of Gaza to a technocratic Palestinian government. They agree, to the Israeli pullout. They agree to the gradual Israeli pullout. They agree that all the hostages will be released in one go during the first 48 or 72 hours, meaning that they have to put their faith in implementation. But the one thing that is critical is disarming. One can be extremely skeptical, and without that, there's no deal. Israel, I am sure. Of this, we can be certain. If they don't agree to that one thing, then there is no deal. And that's when Trump's texted reply to CNN today becomes relevant, where he says they will be obliterated. Israel will go into Gaza City and the rest of Gaza, formally occupied, probably establish a military administration, over 2 million Palestinians. That is a terrible scenario for everyone. It'll end the war for Gazans, but it'll be under Israeli occupation. There will be a prolonged insurgency with the remnants of Hamas. There will be more death for sure, and more isolation for Israel. I have no doubt that elements in Hamas want precisely this. October 7th and its diabolical savagery was engineered to bring about this response by Israel, and I think much of that Israeli response was ill-advised and there were better alternatives, but it's understandable. And in a way, Israel walked into Hamas's trap, and I think the full walking into the full trap will be if they establish a formal and prolonged military occupation of all of the Strip.
Dan, stay with us. There's more to talk about. Well, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has said that nearly 900,000 Palestinians have been displaced in Gaza City since the IDF launched its offensive. He cited the occupation of Gaza, collapse of multi-story buildings and intensity of military operations as the main reason for mass evacuations to the south. Let's in fact listen in to what the Defense Minister of Israel had to say.
ההחלטה לכבוש את עזה, הקרסת רבי הקומות ועוצמת התמרון של צה"ל בעיר עזה, אותו מובילים חיילינו הגיבורים, הביאו לפינוי של כ-900,000 מתושבי עזה דרומה וללחץ אדיר על החמאס והמדינות שתומכות בו.
All right. Meanwhile, Germany says it will strongly support U.S. President Trump's Middle East peace plan, calling it a unique opportunity to end the two-year conflict between Israel and Hamas. Foreign Minister Johann Wattbull will visit Qatar and Kuwait to discuss the immediate release of hostages, including German nationals, and to offer humanitarian aid and support for the stabilization and reconstruction of Gaza. Meanwhile, Pope Leo also called for a permanent ceasefire, the release of hostages, and a just and lasting peace, while expressing concern over rising anti-Semitic hate and the earthquake victims in the Philippines. All right, Dan Perry, World Affairs analyst, still with us on the broadcast. Dan, do you really think that this is, once in a lifetime opportunity between Israel and Palestine? Such opportunities have come by in the past as well. Bill Clinton, I remember, was working on something similar, didn't fructify. Jimmy Carter tried to do something similar with Yasser Arafat and the PLO. It did not fructify. The two-nation solution is also something which is out in the open for discussion. instead of, clearing out all these symptoms, it's important for world leaders such as Donald Trump to get to the bottom of this issue?
No, I don't think this necessarily leads very quickly to a two-state solution. Not at all. This is an important opportunity to end the war, and that's achievement enough. It's certainly positive if Hamas is removed as an armed militia undermining the sovereignty of a potential Palestine. So the removal of Hamas, the weakening of Hamas, the weakening of the axis of resistance, so-called Iranian-backed axis of resistance, all these militias all over the region that have been somewhat thrashed in some cases, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, all this is good. But when you look at the talk of a two-state solution, the basic reality that the Palestinian minimal demand doesn't reach the maximal Israeli give, it remains. I have difficulty seeing how, the Palestinians are awarded half of the city of Jerusalem, which they claim, and it may seem like a reasonable claim, except these are countries that will need to have a border because there will be a lot of distrust for many decades. I can have a border in the middle of the city. There are many details that make it seem extremely, extremely unlikely. On the other hand, there's also an imperative for Israel itself. In Israel, there is opposition to a full pullout from the West Bank, let's say, because the West Bank is highly strategic territory that surrounds Jerusalem on three sides, and from which you can see the high-rise towers of Tel Aviv. And if that area were to be taken over by Hamas or by ISIS, that's bad. How to assure that it wouldn't be is extremely difficult to conceive. So they claim they need it for strategic defense purposes, and that claim is not ridiculous. On the other hand, the combined territory of Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank has 15 million people, equally divided between Jews and Arabs, almost exactly. And if Israel insists on keeping it, for this legitimate strategic reason that I cite, basically its smallness, keeping the Palestinians disenfranchised is not a long-term solution, and the day is not far away when the Palestinians will demand, with world support, that Israel annex these areas formally and give them citizenship so they can vote in Israeli elections. And the road from that to a democratic takeover of Israel by the Palestinians and a renaming of it Palestine is also pretty visible. So there's no great options here. And this, notion that it's just obvious that it should be a two-state solution and surely they can agree on terms and anything else is crazy, is something I'd like to see happen for sure, because both sides deserve their aspirations and to live in peace and prosperity, of course. But it's also extremely naive, very, very, very naive. And the idea that there must be a Palestinian state also is somewhat counterfactual to history. Plenty of groups in the world that have more of a claim to nationhood don't have a state. The Kurds don't have a state. The Basques and Catalans don't have a state. All kinds of groups all over the Middle East don't have a state. The Palestinians didn't know they were a people until about 1960. You'll find no reference to it in history. So is there some other way to disentangle the Jews from the Arabs in the Holy Land without endangering Israel, but without oppressing the Palestinian Arabs is yet to be seen. I favor the two-state solution myself, but I'm not starry-eyed about its prospects, nor about the degree to which it will be difficult to agree on the details. And the details in this case are where the devil lies. They're not nuanced, they're critical.
Then stay with us. In fact, Palestinians mourned and laid their loved ones to rest in Khan Younis on Sunday after an Israeli strike a day earlier. Medics at Nasser Hospital have confirmed this. Israeli planes and tanks continued to pound areas across Gaza overnight and Sunday, destroying several residential buildings. Witnesses reported as Palestinians hoped a U.S. peace plan would ease their suffering. Israel escalated its offensive ahead of talks in Egypt with Hamas, Israel, and the U.S. and Qatar to discuss implementing efforts to halt the conflict. Israel began attacking Gaza after the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack on Israel that killed 1,200 mostly civilians and took 251 people hostage. Gaza health authorities say that Israel's campaign has killed over 67,000 people, mostly civilians. Let's listen into some of the reactions that have come in.
أتمنى من الله أن تقف هاي الأمور كلها وترفد الأمور بالنسبة للشعب، والشعب تعب والشعب قرف والشعب مش قادر يواصل لوين إلا غير إنه بفقد في أولاده يوم عن يوم، وإصابات وجرحى، وأنتم شايفين كل الأمور. كفاكوا عن غزة وكفاكوا عن الناس وكفاكوا عن البشر، كفاكوا الجرائم التي نواجهها يوما على يوم. وجه للعالم كمان وللعرب وللمسلمين، اصحوا من نومكم، اصحوا من نومكم، القدس للجميع والإسلام للجميع، وحسبي الله ونعم الوكيل.
Well, the head of Hamas's negotiating delegation, Khalil Al Hayya, has appeared in a video message shared by the Palestinian group, his first public statement since Israel attempted to kill him in a missile strike in Qatar. The short video released by Hamas showed Al Hayya saying that the daily killing and destruction in Gaza makes him forget the pain of losing his own children and loved ones. The assassination attempt took place on September 9th when Israeli airstrikes targeted Hamas leaders in Qatar's capital Doha as they discussed a US-backed ceasefire proposal. The strike killed his office director, Jihad Labad, his son, 3 aides and a Qatari security officer. During a meeting with Trump last week, Netanyahu called Qatar's prime minister to apologize for the attack and the killing of a Qatari citizen. Let's in fact listen into what was said.
واليوم ونحن نعيش في ظلال ألم وفي ظلال عزة وكرم. ألم بفقدان آلاف من أبناء شعبنا من النساء والأطفال والشيوخ والمجاهدين وأبناء شعبنا بشكل عام، وشرفنا الله عز وجل أن يكون من بينهم أبناؤنا وأحفادنا وإخواننا وأقاربنا، وكل أبناء شعبنا هم بمثابة الأبناء والإخوة والأحفاد والأقارب. فنحن ننتمي لهذه الأسرة الكبيرة، أسرة الشعب الفلسطيني، وخاصة أبناء غزة الذين ينوبون اليوم عن الأمة بجهادهم وصبرهم وتضحياتهم التي قل وعز نظيرها على مدار التاريخ. وفي قضيتنا الفلسطينية على مدار 100 عام اليوم غزة تنوب عن الأمة بما تقدم وتجود بنفسها وخير ما تجود بنفسها. فنسأل الله عز وجل أن ينزل الصبر والسلوان والسكينة على.
Right. Dan, of course, we all want this peace plan to be executed and this conflict to halt. But there are always elements, being produced out of countries like Iran, proxies that have also, been an impediment to this peace process. What should be the long-term plan in tackling those?
I felt it was a mistake by the U.S. To not strike while the iron was hot with Iran after the 12-day war. When Iran was pretty desperate, the regime was quite relieved to have somehow survived and had been schooled pretty seriously by the fact that its airspace was basically completely available to the Israeli Air Force for that entire time. And of course, their nuclear program and missile program had been badly set back. So there should have been a strong arming of Iran at that point to agree to not only end the nuclear program, but to also end their project of spreading chaos throughout the Arab Middle East with these militias. And it should have been clear that the Arab world views that entire enterprise as completely illegitimate. There is no reason whatsoever that there should be a Hezbollah in Lebanon undermining Lebanon. Now, the Lebanese government, somewhat emboldened by the weakening of Hezbollah during that element of the war a year ago, is now openly saying they want to disarm Hezbollah, but they're going to need help. So the long-term solution, if you want normalcy in the Middle East, if you want, for example, Israel to take the risks, huge risks, entailed in pulling out of the West Bank and allowing even a demilitarized Palestinian state, these militias have to go. Hamas has to go. Islamic Jihad has to go. Hezbollah has to go. The Houthis, for that matter, the Shiite militias in Iraq that are undermining Iraq, again, at the behest of Iran, have to go. The region has accepted complete and total craziness for a very, very, very long time. And, not that anything was worth the scale of destruction that we've seen in Gaza and, of course, the horrors of October 7th in Israel. But some good can come out of this in the sense that maybe some of that craziness can end. And by the way, Israel will have to let go of some nonsense as well. I mean, the settlements deep inside the West Bank. If that continues, then Israel should be made to understand that they're going to have to annex the West Bank and give the Palestinians, citizenship in Israel. The settlements have to stop. Israel's demonization of the Palestinian Authority.
All right, Dan.
I mean, the Israeli government, which is
Dan, we've run out of time, but I appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for those insights. Moving on, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said on Sunday that cooperation with the United Nations nuclear watchdog is no longer relevant following the reimposition of international sanctions. He referred to the September Cairo agreement with the IAEA, which had been designed to resume inspections after Tehran halted cooperation due to Israeli and US strikes in June. Araghchi criticized the E3 nation, UK, France and Germany for reimposing sanctions, saying this undermines their role in future nuclear talks. Iran accused the IAEA of failing to condemn attacks on its sites and rejects Western claims it seeks nuclear weapons, stating its program is civilian under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Araghchi also said that Iran's final decision on cooperation will be announced soon, but diplomacy is still possible. Listen in to what the Iranian foreign minister had to say.
سه کشور اروپایی به خیال خودشون یک اهرامی رو در دست داشتن، اهرام اسنپبک، و تهدید به اجرای اون میکردن. خب الان این اهرام رو به کار گرفتن و نتیجهش رو هم دیدن. هیچ اتفاقی نیفتاد که بتونه مشکلی رو حل بکنه و صرفاً دیپلماسی رو سخت‌تر و پیچیده‌تر کردن. سه کشور اروپایی قطعاً نقش خودشون رو کمرنگ‌تر کردن و توجیه مذاکراتی با خودشون رو تقریباً از بین بردن و در هر گونه راه حل مذاکراتی آینده من تصور می‌کنم که نقش بسیار کمتری از گذشته خواهند.
Right. Well, the Russian Defense Ministry has stated that Russian forces have carried out massive strikes on Ukrainian military, industrial enterprises and gas facilities. The attacks targeted energy infrastructure facilities, and this comes as Ukraine earlier reported drone sightings at industrial zones along the border. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky accused them of being spy drones. The front lines remain active as the Russian Defense Ministry says that the Russian forces have captured Kuzminovka in Ukraine's Donetsk region. Russia continues to intensify attacks across eastern Ukraine, including the Donetsk, Sumy, the Kharkiv and Kherson regions. Let's listen in to what the residents had to say.
Біда сталася, що сталося? Даху нема. Вікна всі повилітали, всі двері всередині все повилітало. Ну що їм ще можу сказати? Я не маю бажання говорити. Дверей нема, вікон нема, даху нема.
All right, Ross Feingold, political analyst, is joining us from Taipei at this point in time. Ross, always a pleasure having you. Well, you know, everybody was hoping that the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is going to taper down. You know, it's unfortunate that the events and whatever was going on, especially in the last 24 hours, continues to point towards the opposite. It seems that Russia has upped the ante against Ukraine.
We've known for some time throughout the recent weeks and months of heavy engagement by President Trump and his special envoy that Russia continues to try to change the facts on the ground and control as much territory as possible in advance of some kind of ceasefire or a long-term peace agreement, because Russia's thinking here is that President Trump would say to President Zelensky, there's a ceasefire or peace agreement opportunity or deal on the table, but you have to accept the reality that Russia occupies part of Ukraine's territory and you cannot expel the Russian military from those occupied areas. So that's Russia's thinking here, that the U.S. would put pressure on Ukraine to basically accept a ceasefire or a halt to the fighting where the current front line is. So based on that thinking, Russia continues to try to advance forward. We have to keep in mind, though, that Russia's gains on the ground are very, very small and very, very costly. That being said, they continue to make small gains on the ground.
Ross, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for giving that perspective. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more updates from around the world. Thank you for watching.